We're live in 3, 2...
Welcome into Leather Brains. Your host, Slap Dog, here for episode 213. The Super Bowl has happened, gentlemen, and that's what we're going to be discussing here today. So it's Super Bowl recap, and there's a lot of different ways we could kick this thing off, but I'd like to start by saying I'm sorry, gentlemen. As Chiefs fans, this was not what I wanted to see. So I'm just going to open the floor. I have Alan Casanova Castro and Scotty Del Rey here. We got our entire cast, and I'll let one of you guys kind of take the reins here and begin this conversation, because it was
Do we just start with a Scotty rant, or
I don't know, Scotty, I know you probably have a rant teed off, so would you like to start?
I don't have the energy to rant. I'm exhausted. I have a lot of thoughts. The thoughts will come out as we discuss.
Well, then
I'll start it. I'll frame it. I'll get us framed up. I'll get us framed up, Scotty. I think the game itself was kind of a snoozer. It was just pretty obvious through the end of almost through halftime where this game was going to go. I think everybody kind of understood that this was, unless some miracle happened, Eagles were going to win this game. And I think everything after that was academic. I think it was obviously the two best teams in the NFL, and I think one of those teams failed to show up with energy, playing well, and it really led to the score we have. I think in the NFL, you very rarely see blowouts, and I think it's kind of telling that in two Super Bowls the Chiefs have been in, the ones that they've lost badly. It wasn't close in either of them. And you could point to one thing that was in both of those, and it was the O-line and the play calling
I was
that
really
really
say
didn't.
Tom Brady. Tom Brady was involved in both of them.
Yeah, and Tom Brady was involved.
True.
I think that's what it was. I mean, because if you look at this, if you look at who the Eagles played through the playoffs, who the Chiefs played through the playoffs, I think largely people thought, hey, whoever comes out of the AFC's probably got the leg up. I think people just forgot through the course of the year, because they got so infatuated with a few teams, just how stacked the Eagles were at certain positions. In this Eagles, and we've talked about this throughout the whole year, but this Chiefs line had problems. They largely held it together and got it to where they were. It's like a modern miracle that they got to the record they did. And I think people kind of understood that with one-score games. But this is, if you're looking at one of the possible scenarios, it was the Eagles kind of running away and hiding. Now, I don't think that's taking anything away from what the Chiefs did this season. I think this season, the last few years, you look at, if you're a Chiefs fan over the last 3 years, this is, the first loss you've seen in the playoffs in quite some time. It's been a lot of days since you've had to deal with one of these. So I think you're remembering what this feels like, because largely it's the Chiefs doing this to other teams. But this is, you could play this game a bunch of times, and I don't think you get this every time. I think this was a cataclysmic amount of errors all at once, which I think honestly is kind of surprising with Andy Reid. But on the flip side, Eagles, I think they're stacked. They were loaded. I know we'll dive into some keys of the game, but it's a roster you put together where you're like, all right, let's just try to put like the best things we can together and see where it goes. And this is the team you get. They can win in multiple ways, and they won in a way that I don't think people had circled going into this game.
No, I mean, first things first, you got to give credit to the Eagles, because holy shit. Like they left no doubt. They showed up to play. They showed up saying, hey, we remember what it was like to lose in the Super Bowl. It's not going to happen again. And you saw it at every position. I mean, the Chiefs did some good things. It was pretty much all on the defensive side. I talked before this game about how, the only outcome I would be really surprised by is a Chiefs blowout, which insinuates that an Eagles blowout was more probable in my mind. I did not expect an Eagles blowout with Saquon Barkley having like 50 rushing yards. That is not what I...
And I think that's a really good thing to highlight, and that's kind of where my mind initially went when we opened up this conversation is, we talked last week, what do the Chiefs need to do to win this game? And unanimously we said, you need to stop Saquon Barkley. And the Chiefs did. I mean, for all intents and purposes, the Chiefs stopped Saquon Barkley. But what they didn't do was stop Jalen Hurts throwing the ball to his wide receivers, and that's really what gouged you.
Not even that. Not even that.
Yeah.
The way the Chiefs lost this game is the way that they have the reason why they were in so many one-score games all season long, and it's the offensive line. The offensive line. This was the worst performance of an offensive line I think I've ever seen in an NFL game. And I watched Panthers games. I've seen Giants games. This is the worst offensive line performance I've ever seen. We've been dealing with it all year long as Chiefs fans. And it's something, if you're not a Chiefs fan and you're not watching all of these games closely, you might not even be aware of it because the Chiefs won, like all of them. But this was a constant problem. Patrick Mahomes' stats were all down because of this offensive line. He was running for his life all season long. The Eagles are just freaking stacked. It's one of the best defensive lines in football. It's the reason why they have the best pass defense in the NFL this year is because of the pressure that they get from that defensive line. And just if you look back, especially at the first half of this game, there's a lot I have to say about coaching because I think, holy shit, that could have been improved. But when you look back at the first half of this game, what you saw is Patrick Mahomes looking like a moron because he is being put under pressure within 1.5 seconds of receiving the ball. And that happened in the entire first half with 4 rushers. They never blitzed a single other player on the defensive side for the entire first half. Patrick Mahomes was sacked like 4 times in the first half and like another 3 times in the second half, and they never blitzed. It was just a pathetic showing from the offensive. It had nothing, I don't want to take anything away from the Eagles because they're stacked all the way across the board. They played a great game. You can't talk shit on Jalen Hurts. You can't even talk shit on Saquon Barkley in this game. Everybody played well. But the Chiefs totally blew it. I mean, this offensive line was pathetic, and it never gave them an opportunity. Like, they never had a chance from the first drive. They had one first down in the first half.
I felt like I was watching Joe Burrow play football. Because, you talk about bad offensive lines, Joe Burrow's certainly up there in the conversation. And it was when he was in the Super Bowl, and I think he got sacked like 6 or 7 times when he went. And it just kind of was reminiscent of that when I was watching this game. This game sucked. This game was a snooze fest. This game was over, by halftime.
Literally. The pick 6 was the stake in the whole thing.
Yeah.
That was it. That was Mahomes running for his life on a 3rd down, which everybody's going to give him shit. But the 2 picks he threw in this game, one running for his life, trying to save something on a 3rd down where they're trying to get back into the game and do something. And then the other one, he's getting hit as he's throwing it and throws another interception. And it's just like it's a team game. And we say it all the time. Wins aren't a quarterback stat. It's a team game. Everybody. And this was 100% it. The Eagles defense made plays. Barkley didn't have to do anything. And by and large, Jalen Hurts didn't have to do anything. He made some big throws late, but there's there's no pressure on that. He's just kind of chucking it. It's no skin off their back if they hit it or don't hit it. But it's like that's the thing with this Eagles team is they could beat you in multiple ways. And this was the one that I think 2 Super Bowls ago, I think people thought was going to happen, where it was the D-line got after a Chiefs offensive line that was a little shaky, and then they finally did it this year where it was definitely shaky, where you have a all-pro guard trying to play left tackle.
It was tough. It was tough to. I was rooting for the Chiefs, so I apologize, gentlemen. I think I was ultimately the downfall here because I took the Chiefs.
Your hatred. Normally, I'm with you on
God
that,
knew.
But your hatred would not have
God
saved
knew.
the Chiefs. There was not a damn outside of a meteor strike, canceling the season. There was no saving the Chiefs in this game. Like there was nothing. It was that bad that you can't look at one single thing besides the offensive line. You can't look at one particular play or one particular call. Which, as Chiefs fans, we've lived off those like one opportunity to capitalize on a mistake to win the game. There is nothing. Nothing.
I wanted to highlight something because I think this is really interesting, and we talk about it during the regular season, but how stats don't tell a story because everybody's so quick, especially on Sundays where maybe people don't watch the game and they just look at the score and they're like, look at the stats and like, how did everybody do? Oh my God, Joe Burrow's an MVP. If I told you before this game that Pat Mahomes is going to throw for over 250 yards, have 3 touchdowns, and Saquon Barkley is going to average 2.3 yards a carry, there's probably 9 out of 10 ways you're like, Chiefs probably ran away with that game. Like Saquon didn't do anything. Like, and it just shows you that the Eagles are just loaded. I mean, very rarely do you come off of a Super Bowl appearance and get a top 10 pick and get another, stud defensive tackle. And it's like they're benefiting from things. They benefited from the Giants' stupidity. They just benefited from a lot of things this year that they put themselves in the positions to do to create this just behemoth of a roster that can go out and win these games. And, I know Jalen Hurts is going to get a lot of credit for how this team performed, but honestly, they didn't need Jalen Hurts. You could have had many different quarterbacks back there to get this kind of result.
Oh wait,
they did. They did. And so that's what I think is interesting, because I know everybody, even the talking heads on ESPN, are going to be like, well, is Jalen Hurts now a top 5 quarterback? Is he better than Burrow and Josh Allen because now he has one Super Bowl? And it's like, I don't know. I mean, he's good. He's an athlete. I think kind of the way some of the things he says are kind of cringy, because I think he's forcing himself to be like poetic.
It's
not,
like, yeah.
Just fucking say and give an answer like, oh, I was grow up this. No, just fucking say it, man. Like, you don't have to be poetic, but I think it plays into his aura that he has, and he's a good looking dude, and I would trade him straight up. But it was just a complete team domination win. It was just like there was nothing you're gonna do. They just kicked the Chiefs' ass for 4 quarters.
Yeah,
well, 3 quarters. Technically, the Chiefs won the 4th quarter, so maybe we can hang our hat on that. Chiefs won one of the 4 quarters.
When all of the second string was in the Super Bowl.
That
to
me was embarrassing.
Terrible feeling.
Like,
the whole thing was embarrassing.
The whole thing was embarrassing, but the fact that this is the biggest game of the year, right? Like, this is supposedly the 2 best teams out there, and you hope it's.
You
a
don't
good
think
game.
These were the 2 best?
I mean, obviously they were, because they made it there. But the fact that in that moment you're able to roll out your second string offense, like that to me, I was just like, that almost hurt worse, because it just showcased like, okay, the Eagles are done. Like, and they were. I mean, obviously we know football, and we know that they could not compete anymore, and the time was up. But like, the fact that you rolled out your second string in the Super Bowl was just like, that's tough to see. That was tough for me to see, and I'm not a Chiefs fan. I'm just like, God, that really sucks.
But I think that really underscores how this was. I know that the Eagles deserve all the credit, but I think this really underscores how flat and how unorganized and how un-Chiefs-like this Andy Reid-led Chiefs team was. This was everything that you thought they were going to show. They were going to play hard. They're going to have a good game plan. They're going to execute that game plan, and it was like, no game plan. Matt and I are texting each other, why are they not running the ball? I think the first 9 plays were all passes. And then
worse than that, there was 1 run play prior to the 2-minute warning in the first half. 1.
Yeah, like a handoff.
How does that happen?
You look at even in this game, the 2 leading rushers for both teams were Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts, you expect that from to some degree. I think that still would have been shocking to know what Saquon did, but you wouldn't be like, oh my God, the world's falling. But when Mahomes is your leading rusher, that's when you have no other running back for the Chiefs was over 10 yards in rushing.
They didn't even try. That was the most frustrating part of the first half, was from the first drive. Okay, the first pass was a 10-yard completion. That was the only first down we got the entire first half. From the first drive, it was clear that this pass rush is a problem. If there's one coach in the NFL that you expect to look at that and say, oh shit, this is a real problem, let me make a whole shitload of adjustments and get in the minds of the other team and figure out a way to move past that, it's Andy Reid. There was not a single adjustment. We didn't, we've gotten through this bad offensive line all season long because of Hunt, because of Pacheco, because we've gotten creative with the offense and we've been able to move Patrick Mahomes out of the pocket. There was none of that in the entire first half. It was like the coaching staff just fell asleep and we're just like, well, they'll figure it out on their own. They'll do it. It was so frustrating to watch, for a lot of reasons. But the number one reason I was annoyed is because it was like every single time the offense took the field, it's like, okay, now we're going to start running the ball. Now we're going to give it to Kareem Hunt. Now we're going to give it to Isaiah Pacheco, and at least make the pass rush think, because rushing the passer and stopping the run on the defensive line are 2 completely different skill sets. You might be good at one and not so good at the other. So you need to get a little bit of ebb and flow. If the defense knows, in the second half, obviously the Chiefs had to pass a bunch because, the deficit was so huge. But in the first half, it's like you have to make them think before they can just fire off the ball and rush the passer. We never even tried. It was crazy to me to witness just how unbelievably flat not only the offensive line was, but the coaching staff, supposedly the best coaching staff in the NFL.
Yep.
Okay, so I pose this. This is a two-part question, and I'll start with this. We obviously know the O-line was a problem. That was the pitfall of the Chiefs. So we've kind of covered that already, and it holds true. That is the reason that you guys did not find success. But earlier one of you had mentioned, the something along the lines of like Chiefs players didn't come out and look like they were ready to play, right? Like they didn't look like they had that mentality. Do you think that maybe they didn't because they leaned too heavy on we have Patrick Mahomes, so anything's possible? That's the first part of the question. And then my second part of the question is, where, aside from the O-line, where's the biggest pitfall? If we were to play the blame game, who are we blaming aside from the offensive line on this Chiefs loss?
Okay. All right. I got to answer. I'm going to answer two questions. The first one,
Yes.
was it relying on Pat Mahomes?
Do you think the players got
bit.
too comfortable saying we got Patrick Mahomes?
I think so.
He'll figure it out.
I think so. I think it's you very quickly remember and forget all at the same time that it is a team game. Like I said, that there's no reason that the Eagles should have won that. They could play each other 10 times. I think what it came down to was, one, I think the Chiefs game plan was very complacent in, okay, I think we can hit these underneath routes and these guys can get open, which I think was like the initial, you could see it from the initial play call that we're going to hit these underneath routes. So they wanted to lean on Mahomes throwing. Like that was their recipe to like getting down the field quickly, was these little chunk plays. And you kind of saw it in the Bills game a little bit where they're hitting these underneath seam routes. The problem is just like, I think they underestimated how much their hands were going to be full with that D line without any blitzing. I think they just totally underestimated the gaps they had on that O-line and thought with the quick passing they could get it out. Well, the problem is they weren't getting open right away. They were missing throws. It was just a comedy of errors, like all at once. So I think, yes, to your point, I think it was a little bit of, I think Mahomes can get it done for us and everybody kind of sitting and watching. Two, if I don't get to blame the offensive line, which I feel like that's 1 through 10.
Sure. No, and I agree with that.
I think I put this on Nagy and Reid as not having a secondary plan to fall to and feeling confident that they could just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. And which is shocking for Reid at this stage in his career, but that's who I'm going to put this on if I don't get to put it on the O-line.
Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
Scotty, you agree with all of that?
Yeah, I mean, it really, I don't know about the whole Patrick Mahomes, this is a team that has championship pedigree. They not only have won in the postseason, but have won several close regular season games, even against teams that they should be blowing out. And you'd expect a team like that to be mentally tough and maintain confidence. But in particular, this offensive line, and we'll harp on it the whole episode because it was the story of the game, but the offensive line looked utterly defeated from the first drive on. I mean, there were several plays where you can watch the ball get snapped to Patrick Mahomes, and you see 3 of the 4 defensive linemen for the Eagles beat their blocker. Like, it was just one after another, after another, after another. So, to me, it was almost like they lacked the resilience that we come to expect from everyone on the Chiefs. It was something went wrong, and then now they've given up, and they did that in the first 5 minutes of the game. Like it was instantaneous, that it just looked like there was no effort whatsoever, particularly on the offensive line. The defense played really well. They gave up 40 points, but a lot of that was garbage time, just like the Chiefs points were. I mean, the game was over and people weren't playing as hard as they otherwise would. The defense played really well. They came out and they executed the game plan, but the offense was just dilapidated and dead from the first 5 minutes of the game. And I don't know what the reason for that is. I don't know if they expected to come out and walk all over this team, and when things went bad, they just got in their own heads. Maybe they need an emotional support book like A.J. Brown. We were making fun of him, but maybe that's the key. I don't know, but something happened in their brains.
He had on the Super Bowl. He had on the sideline for this game.
Yeah. Something happened in their brains, and it's like they just decided, okay, I'm done playing. And for the rest of the game, it was like that.
Through the first 3 possessions they each had, it was still 7-0, and it still largely felt like the Eagles were having their way with them. I mean, it wasn't the defense was bailing them out in multiple situations, and they hold they get an interception in turn Jalen Hurts over, couldn't do anything, 3 plays punt, hold the Eagles again to a field goal. Next they get the ball, pick 6, and it's like those are things where it just wasn't complimentary. The offense wasn't doing anything. The offensive line was just leaking the whole time, and it's unfortunate because if you take away 14 of the points that the Chiefs offense gave them that they don't normally give another team, you just feel wildly different about this game going down the stretch. It's more of a slugfest. It's a defensive battle. It was just the Chiefs offense and that offensive line did things to give the Eagles extra opportunities that they don't normally get. And that's where I was saying, the scoreboard, it is what it is. That's why this game is interesting, because you get one shot. It's not like Major League Baseball where it's a 7-game series and you get to experience the highs and lows of each game. You're like, all right, it's all right, whatever, one game we'll get it. Or an NBA series, you get one shot at it. And then, when you have a team that comes out flat, you have offensive linemen that aren't playing sound football, and you have Mahomes now realizing he's got to do it all on his own, then it's just a recipe for disaster. And that's what you had to watch for 4 quarters, was basically just a team that couldn't get out of its own way. For everything good that the Eagles did, it was, I would say, equal that the Chiefs let that happen to themselves.
Yeah. And I feel terrible for Patrick Mahomes because obviously, he is widely known as the best quarterback in football, so he's going to get a lot of criticism when games turn out like this. I firmly believe it's not his fault. He had a couple bad throws, but he was under total duress. Like you could go to a mad scientist and create the perfect quarterback in a laboratory and drop him into this Chiefs offense during that Super Bowl, and they would suck because there's nothing a quarterback can do about that situation. It was just totally out of his hands, and I got to imagine that by like the 3rd drive, he gets the play call in his helmet, and he's like, please just let me hand the ball to Isaiah Pacheco. Please, for the love of God, just let me give the ball to somebody else. Because he probably ran like 40 miles during the course of this game and got just demolished by giant human beings the entire time. Like, I just feel terrible for him. Like, there's nothing he could do. There's nothing he could do different.
On the flip side of that, though, the Eagles' game plan, Vic Fangio sticking to his guns the whole time, I love that they were giving him his flowers, but like literally by the 2nd quarter, he didn't have to do anything. I'm not even sure he had to call anything different. It was like, it's like when you're playing Madden and you just keep picking the same play over and over again because it's working. It's like on defense, I'm pretty sure it was just the same play over and over again.
Base cover 2, baby.
And when they did blitz a couple times, Mahomes completed quick passes and they were moving the ball. So it's like, all right, stop blitzing then. Let's go back. Because it was towards the end there, they were blitzing to try to get him off the field because Mahomes was moving the ball, and obviously as a defense, you're proud. You don't want to give up points, but shout out Vic Fangio. That defense was playing hard all year. They're the number 1 defense in football for a reason. They did what they had to do to keep the Chiefs off balance, and they just exposed highlighted the biggest weakness of this team, which was that O-line, and he made no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That we are gonna handle this with 4 guys because we can, and good luck throwing into a shell coverage.
Honestly, I'm going to say one last thing, and then I'm going to stop being depressed. I'm flipping the switch.
You shouldn't be depressed.
So
you shouldn't be depressed. Listen,
it's all in context,
for all the shit,
picture,
for all the Chiefs, for all the shit the Chiefs fans get, and everybody's like loves to pile on a team that's down. Every other fan would kill a close family member to have a run that the Chiefs just had, and then that are in the middle of still having, and isn't fucking over. So anybody that's going to throw dirt on it saying, oh, finally got him. Yeah, you finally got him in a Super Bowl. They're still getting to Super Bowls. They're still getting to AFC title games. So I would not hang your head. Don't get depressed. Shit happens. They got beat by a better team playing that day. You move on to the next one. You can't win them all. You literally can't.
I appreciate that very mature outlook. I need like 48 hours before I can get to a mature outlook. So for now, I'm depressed. And the reason I'm depressed is because this thought actually went into my head. I was watching the game, and it was like a quarter and a half in. And I actually thought to myself, I wish I was watching the Bills play this game right now. Like, I wish... as a Chiefs fan, we have become the enemy of everyone in the NFL, which is cool. And so normally I give basically no flowers to anybody else. Like we're kind of on our own. We're isolated. We're a team. I feel bad for all of the football fans who had to watch this game. Like I feel guilty as a fan of this team that just totally made this Super Bowl basically unwatchable. It was. I feel bad for the advertisers who paid millions of dollars to put their Super Bowl ad in the fourth quarter of what was supposed to be an awesome game, and like half the people were watching because it was just like, this game's terrible.
Oh yeah, no, there was a lot of people, myself included, who was like, I think I'm just gonna finish watching this in bed because like this sucks. This is not, and I had to watch it, but I didn't want to because I already knew the game was over. But it's like, all right, I gotta watch it because it's the Super Bowl. But yeah, I blame Matt Nagy. I throw a lot of the blame on Matt Nagy. Obviously, the offensive line gets the number one for me, but Matt Nagy is right up there. I have never thought Matt Nagy was a good coach when he was with the Bears. I thought him coming back to the Chiefs was not the right move. I wish Bieniemy was still there, just to maybe see what he could have done. And I don't know if he could have overcame the deficiencies of that offensive line, but I think from a play calling standpoint, we would have seen some more creativity, and Matt Nagy has never shown that in his entire career. So, like, where's the screens? Like, if you know that that offense or that defensive line is getting that crazy, like, run the ball, do some screens, mix it up a little bit.
The only thing you can do in that situation is get creative in the run game. Even screens work great against blitzing defenses, but when they're rushing four and they can play man coverage with two over top on everybody else, like you can't run screens. But you at the very least, in the second half of the first quarter or the second quarter, like why are we not on first and second down giving the ball to Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt every time? Because we at least need to make them think that there's a chance we're not passing it. And the fact that never happened, I don't know whose fault that is, if it's Matt Nagy or Andy Reid or some combination of, I don't know.
The scary thing is I think it's more Reid than anything. Like I appreciate the Matt Nagy sentiment, but Bieniemy was the play caller when they had to play the Bucs and had the same problem in the Super Bowl where they couldn't do anything. Just couldn't do anything. That was more drop passes than anything because they were moving the ball. They just couldn't convert and score when they needed to. I mean, as much as I hate to say, like, it's got to be a little bit of or a lot of bit of Andy Reid. I don't know if he was too confident in what he could do and thought he saw something that wasn't there. It's just the inability to adjust that is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
And in the small sample size of this game, the Chiefs had more yards per carry. They had more yards per carry.
That's a small sample size indeed. But, I'm going to say this. I watched God bleed. I watched God bleed again. And that wasn't something that I'd seen very recently or, within the last couple of years for the Chiefs because largely they figure out a way to get done, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I want to talk about, let's go back to the Eagles here for just a moment before we talk about the future of both these teams. Did we underrate them all year? Because I think I certainly did. And that's not to say I underrated Saquon Barkley, but my fear was what happens when there isn't Saquon Barkley? What happens when a team shuts down Saquon Barkley? Will the Eagles be able to get it done? That was, and I'd been saying leading up to this game, that's kind of what I had said very much the same. I said, if they can shut down Saquon Barkley, I'm nervous that the Eagles will find a way to get it done in other areas because largely this entire year it's been Saquon Barkley. Like that has been the focal point of this entire offense is it goes through Saquon Barkley. So in the event that Spagnuolo can shut him down, what does this offense look like for the Eagles? And so, yeah, I did have them underrated in that way because I hadn't seen it. I knew they were capable of it because we've seen it in years past, but are they going to be able to knock the rust off? Are they going to be able to show that they can still get it done? And while it wasn't an insane amount of throwing and whatnot, they still show that they're certainly capable of doing so at a very high level. And so I pose that question to you, gentlemen, is, did we have the Eagles underrated? Did we underrate them all year?
The first thing is, and this is a problem generally with the NFL today, especially in the fantasy football, like top of the line era, we underrated the defense. We underrated the role of the number one defense in football. We underrated the role of this. We talk about all the stars on offense, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley. Like, we don't even mention the defensive linemen. And obviously that was a significant.
Sure.
That was significant. And it's not only that we underrated them, it's the entire Chiefs organization appeared to have underrated them as well. And, the Eagles, you got to give all the credit to them because all year long it was the Detroit Lions, it was the Minnesota Vikings, it was all these people in the NFC, and it was rarely the Eagles. And they just said, well, we'll just keep our mouths shut, and we're just going to win games and win games and win games. And by the way, have one of the best running backs in the history of football. And they just got it done all year long, and they didn't really give a shit what anyone else said. And you got to if you're an Eagles fan right now, top of the moon, obviously, winning the Super Bowl, but also you almost feel like, yeah, we kind of stuck it to the haters a little bit because people, you turn on ESPN, They were talking about Dan Campbell and the Lions. They were talking about, oh my gosh, Sam Darnold has actually figured it out. They're talking about Jordan Love. They weren't talking about the Eagles, and now everyone's talking about the Eagles. So that's got to feel really, really good as an Eagles fan.
I think that's what makes the regular season kind of frustrating. It's because, everybody's trying to follow and you do all these power rankings and who's number one and I think they're the best and they're doing this and that. And the Eagles to start the season, they had some flubs that, they lost to the Bucks, they lost to the Falcons early, and, they're like, okay, what are we getting out of this team? And then they flipped a switch when everything started gelling, from week 6, week 7, week 8 on, and then started putting it on people. And the only game they lost from that point on was to a Jaden Daniels Commanders team, which is kind of understandable seeing how the Commanders ended up, playing them in the NFC title game. So you're like, okay, wait a second. What are they playing? But I think that's generally what I get frustrated about in the NFL because you spend a whole year talking about the team that isn't probably actually the best team. You just talk about teams that are sexy or get the storylines, which actually is kind of infuriating if you're a fan of that team like the Eagles, because you spend a fraction of the time and they're going to get their flowers right now. But then what Eagles fans and every fan that has seen a Super Bowl win, what happens is you get to enjoy it for a second. And then you're right back into the draft. You're right back into spring training. You're right back into the list, and you're not at the top anymore. And you're like, but what about us? We just won. Can we talk about us some more? And the NFL calendar moves so quick. They want these storylines to move. They don't want to dwell on it. Let's get on to the next one. And then before you know it, you have such a small window to actually enjoy anything. But I think that does make me frustrated about the regular season because it doesn't give justice sometimes to the teams that maybe actually are playing good. It's just whatever the storylines are. Anytime I go get my haircut at the barbershop, I swear to God, they talked about the Cowboys incessantly. Why I get why we talk about some of these teams and I get the ratings that it drives from some of these programs, but it is a little bit infuriating to have to sit there for a full season to listen to these ESPNs and the NFL's, talk shows. And you don't get to hear about your team. You just have to follow your local guys. You follow your local podcasts. You follow your local guys on Twitter, and that's it. And then you get to the end, you're like, why didn't anybody talk about this team? And it's like, well, you know what? I know Eagles fans were very confident about the team that they had, and they should have been. This is a stacked roster. This team should have won the Super Bowl. If you look up and down this roster, they should have won. This wasn't an upset by any means that the Eagles won. I don't think anybody is shocked that the Eagles won. If you just woke me up Monday morning and said, hey, the Eagles won, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. The shocking nature is how the Chiefs didn't show up. And I know that's what's going to get talked about the most because that is the thing that's probably most shocking out of all of this. Not that the Eagles won. It's that how flat and how deflated the Chiefs looked from the first snap.
It's kind of ironic. We just talked about how we went through a whole season underrating the Eagles. Then they win the Super Bowl, and look at us. We're still talking about the Chiefs.
Yeah. That's how it is.
But that's that's the product of a lot of success. That's a product of you guys, the Chiefs, being so dominant for the last few years that when they don't show up on the biggest stage, it's going to get talked about. Yeah, that's just the product of the Chiefs' own success and their own ability to have found prior success. And then we saw a lot of things that are we're questioning, right? We're questioning going into it, into this offseason, which you just mentioned, Alan. The calendar moves quick. So let's talk about the future of both these teams because this gets really, really interesting, and especially for the Chiefs. So we'll start there, right? There's a lot of aging assets on this team, and there's a lot of one-year deals. Kelce. Is Travis Kelce going to retire this year? You have Hopkins DeAndre Hopkins was on a 1-year deal. Hollywood Brown was on a 1-year deal. And these are 2 of your starting wide receivers. So we'll start with Kelce. Are we still the mentality that Travis Kelce is going to retire? Because I'm still largely in that boat.
I think I would fight that a lot more if Jason didn't retire after losing a Super Bowl. I think if we saw Jason come back and say, I'm not ending on a loss, like I'm going to play one more season and see how it goes, then I would say, oh, Travis probably has the same mentality.
That's true.
But now it's like, I don't know. It seems like it's that time for him. It's just a question of if he wants to end it on this. And I don't know.
I think the unfortunate thing is that he's kind of become a caricature of who he really was as a player. I think his persona and his, like who he is as a person has kind of gotten overblown because he's, dating the biggest pop star on the planet. So now people hate him for a different reason and he's dumb and he's not one of the best tight ends. It's like, I think a part of me is just a little bit upset with how his career kind of ended because he came into the league as, nobody. He wasn't highly touted. He just came in and worked and was successful and, happened to be in the spot. And I think if they would have won, without a doubt, he would have retired. I think Matt's probably right. I think it's a little bit more up in the air. And I don't know if we're going to know right away. I think you're going to see this play out
right away.
Just a little bit. Yeah.
I don't think
I think he's going to talk, he's obviously going to talk to his people, his family. He's going to talk to his brother. He's going to ask Jason what it was like. Was it worth it coming back that second one? And Jason could flat out tell him, dude, if you already know, I kind of knew. I just tried it one more time. It didn't work. Just go. And I don't know what kind of advice he's going to give, but I'm still leaning in on he's probably going to retire.
I think, I may have brought this up in an episode earlier in the season, but you think about an NFL player, and this is not something that's really talked about in almost any media circle, but you think about who, and this is almost any NFL player, like that's the dream growing up as a kid, right? Like you're playing Pop Warner football and you're like, I love this game. I want to go play in the NFL. You play in high school. My goal is to go D1 and make it in the NFL. You go D1. Your goal is to make it in the NFL. Growing up, for those players who are talented enough to go that far, that is their entire that's their entire life. That's their entire persona. That is what they have strived for their entire life. And so when you get to the NFL, and the really good ones say, okay, how can I stay in this as long as possible? Their entire identity is wrapped up in the sport of football. And so who is that person without the sport? And I think that's something that probably I would imagine a lot of NFL players struggle with is, once you've made it to the highest level, once you've made it to the NFL, you've had your career and it's like, okay, these young guys are starting to beat me out. I'm not looking as good as I used to. I'm not playing as well as I used to. My body's catching up with me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Who am I? What am I besides a football player? And I think that's a really hard thing for a lot of NFL players to come to terms with when, they're on the other side of the cliff and they're starting to look down at the bottom of the hill and they're like, okay, I'm on the lower half of my career here. And I think that's the really nice part about both the Kelces really is, for as much as some people sit here and say, I'm tired of seeing the Kelces, they're everywhere. They're all over the place. They got their own shows aside from their podcast. One of them's an announcer now. I think Travis has something to look forward to kind of continue on without being an NFL player and can still live in that space. And that's something that I think a lot of NFL players can't do because they don't have the right personality. They don't have the right media following. And so I do think Travis retires because I think there are other things and other ventures that he wants to do and is able to do that has given him a different breath of life and said, okay, I am somebody else aside from the sport of football. So that's just one peon here in the giant swarm of NFL fans. That's just my opinion, but I do think that he's got other things going on, right? He is the biggest pop star.
Traditionally, it's been one of the biggest metrics of being able to determine whether or not an NFL player is going to retire is whether or not they're married and have kids. Because if you're not married and have kids, it's a lot harder to find that identity outside of football. If you imagine somebody who has got a wife and 3 children, like Jason, and just say, okay, if I stop playing football, I'm a dad and I'm a husband, and that's my identity. And that's really easy to kind of fall back on and embrace that as the main, in many ways they already think of that as kind of their main role in life. In someone like Travis's shoes, it's a little bit different. He does have other ventures, but it's also like are any of those things going to bring him as much fulfillment as the NFL? And he's going to be going through these thoughts.
Yeah.
You know, if Travis was married and had kids, I think it would be much easier to determine that he's going to be like, yeah, I got bigger and better things to do. Without that, it's the same thing when I was watching that Aaron Rodgers documentary. I finally watched it. He said the same thing. Once I won the Super Bowl, it was like, who am I? It's like, well, maybe find a wife, have some kids. You'll find a lot of meaning in that. You don't got to travel to South America and do drugs to find meaning. You can do it. You can have a good life right here at home.
I think that holds ground. But you know, Kelce's expressed interest in wanting to get into acting and all that kind of stuff. And
Wild. It's still the wildest stat ever is that him and Gronk are the same age.
Yeah, that is wild.
That blows my mind.
But that just goes to show, I mean, like, we're getting close, and obviously we're having this conversation, so we know that. But I think he does hang it up. So, assuming he does hang it up, you've now lost your starting tight end. You still have Noah Gray, of course. And you're potentially going to lose 2 starting wide receivers in Hopkins and Hollywood Brown. You know, is that warrant for concern? Is the weapons that the Chiefs currently have? I mean, Rashee Rice was out for the season, and he's going to be back hopefully next season. And you know, obviously he's got some legal stuff to also figure out on top of that.
No,
I forgot about
it's figured
that.
out. He's fine. He's
okay,
fine.
we scratch that from
He
the
served
record.
he served his suspension via injury.
That's how Rodgers going to look at it too. So I mean, like, are you concerned going into next year? You know, you have Spags, and I think Spags is going to be back. Most of the head coaching vacancies are now have been filled. So you don't have a concern there necessarily. Your O-line is not looking great. There's just a lot of potential turnover here with this Chiefs roster.
Yeah.
I mean, as fans, are you guys concerned about that going into next year?
Not really. I think the only thing is just figuring out the O-line. I think they're going to try to re-sign Hollywood, but it's going to be dependent on what his price tag is. He's going to get interest outside of Kansas City. Somebody's going to want him for more than what the Chiefs are willing to spend. Obviously, you're going to have Rashee Rice coming back. You know, the sneaky thing is, and you can argue with how much that's garbage time, but Worthy didn't look bad.
Mm-hmm.
Worthy looked like he definitely belonged out there with amongst the league's best. And
He's
I
the
think
only one on the Chiefs offense that had a reasonable game. The only one.
He just eye test, everything looked good. And obviously he had the stats when those can be whatever they are. But I think the other thing is you got to figure out what you're going to do with that running back room. I think borrowing Hunt off the couch worked. Signing a cut Samaje worked. How healthy can Pacheco be? Is he going to be what he was post that leg injury? Does he have time to heal? I think they need to figure out the running game. They need to figure out that O-line, and they need to figure out what they're going to do, because you got to lean on that sometimes when you're unable to get guys open. And I don't know if Rashee Rice would have made a difference in this game. Who knows? I don't know if Pacheco was healthy. Who knows? I think what I do know for sure is that they got to figure out that O-line again. And part of what I feel like is ailing the Chiefs and where they're at right now is the success they had over the last few years, because it was quote unquote working. You were winning, but I think it wasn't a call to action to actually fix some of the things that were actually plaguing this team, because it was quote unquote working. And then it festered itself in the worst way at the biggest stage in the biggest moment for your team.
Yeah, I do hope, like I said before, as Chiefs fans, we're all well aware of how bad this offensive line has been all season long. And we just have to hope that it didn't take this for the front office to be like, oh shit, we should probably come up with a plan for that, huh? Like I'm hopeful that rearranging the offensive line, acquiring some pieces, looking at the draft, I'm hoping that this has been a priority of the front office all season long. And as far as the weapons go, we've seen the Chiefs make it work. The big difference between this team and past Chiefs teams is the offensive line. And we've seen the Chiefs make it work with, kind of some subpar weapons. And, Patrick Mahomes can elevate. Juju Smith-Schuster has shown up in every big game the Chiefs have played for 3 years. And it's like, okay, he's not doing that anywhere else. So the Chiefs have the ability with Patrick Mahomes, with Andy Reid, to elevate the pass catchers. But they can't elevate the pass catchers if Patrick Mahomes is getting mollywopped all game long. So they have to address that. And I hope that they already have like a 54-page manifesto detailing exactly how they're going to do that from week 1 this season.
Yeah, and now let's look at the other side of this. Let's look at the Eagles. I mean, is this a budding dynasty that we're about to see here? Obviously, they're going to lose Kellen Moore to the Saints, that's just comical. I don't know why anybody would want to go to the Saints. And Kellen Moore, has been touted as somebody for the last couple of years now as a potential head coach candidate for some different places. I think that's hilarious that the Saints are like the last place I think I'd want to go. If you offered me that job, I'd probably say no. But they're losing Kellen Moore for sure. Sirianni, he's in it for the long haul, right? I think that. No, you're still not buying into that.
It's the Eagles, man. Look how quickly they ran Doug Peterson out of town after he won a Super Bowl. It doesn't take much for you to piss off the Eagles and their fans, and they just make. That GM, they'll make pretty rash decisions. I think, yes, they won. I don't know if it was because of Nick Sirianni, and I know that's hard to prove empirically, but I don't think Nick Sirianni
was a great hire.
I think it was Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio. I think again, he's really good at. If anything else, some NFL teams should just have him come in and hire coordinators at this point. He's a good players coach, but I don't know if this gives him just carte blanche to do whatever he wants with this team, and he can do no wrongs and have two shitty seasons in a row. I think, I think he's going to have some work to do still. This next season is going to be again more evidence of him of what he could hold together. And then as far as the dynasty piece that you had just mentioned, what's ironic is if the Chiefs don't get that game 2 years ago, we're talking the opposite way of dynasty now for the Eagles, where now they've won 2 out of 3 years. And I know a lot of the Eagles fans feel good about stopping the three-peat. They were also part of why the three-peat was started. So it's kind of all square. You're back to even now as far as the talk, but they have the roster to do it. It's just now, can you replicate it? Because they were kind of on a little bit of a revenge kick for all of this, and now you got there.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask any athlete, any professional athlete, they've interviewed tons that have won championships and then have never gone back. It's much harder to go back up the mountain and win it and defend your title than it is to put in the work to get there. There's something that drives you. So it'll be interesting to see if they can recapture all of that energy again.
Yeah, and I'm not going to make the same mistake I made in the pregame before the Super Bowl, saying that this team is reliant on Saquon Barkley. But we do have to recognize that the shelf life on running backs is short. They have a tendency to see injuries. Is Saquon Barkley going to be able to stay healthy consistently for the rest of his time with the Eagles, and how is that going to impact their potential success in addition to the potential turnover that they're going to see with the offensive coordinator, or obviously they are going to see with the offensive coordinator? So, to say it's impossible to be a dynasty. There are very few teams that have pulled that off. The Eagles have certainly, much like the 49ers, been very competitive for a while now, and they're one of those teams that it's not going to surprise you if they're in the Super Bowl next year and the year after that. But it's really hard to do that. And, the odds that they make it to the Super Bowl right now are going to be pretty slim. Even they might have the best odds of anyone in the league. It's still going to be slim. So the dynasty talk is fun for Eagles fans. It's just something we're just going to have to wait and see play out. As far as the Sirianni stuff, this guy's made it to 2 Super Bowls in 4 years. I understand the quick turnover, and I share the same skepticism of him largely because of his personality and his face, which annoys me. But at some point, you got to be well, the resume speaks for itself. I think he's earned himself a lot of grace.
Saying it's Philadelphia, man.
Yeah, and I don't disagree.
They're not. They don't hesitate. They'll get your ass right out of there if they feel like their return on investment isn't there. I think any other organization, he would have earned his keep for much longer. Let's say he was on the Bengals. Yeah. He would have a statue. He'd have a lifetime contract already.
Or the Cowboys.
Can do no wrong.
They would have signed him to a 25-year deal.
Yeah. It's just the Eagles, they don't fuck around, man. You better be doing your shit year in and year out.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I just think for the most part, maybe it goes back to Allen's adage. It depends on what it looks like. If he completely blows it, then I could see that happening. But ultimately, in most cases, when a team kind of falls off a cliff, it's because of a really clear reason, whether it's injuries or something else. Something goes wrong that you can kind of blame it on. And I think the Eagles organization, if something were to go wrong next year and the year after that, they're going to find other things to blame it on before Nick Sirianni, unless it's impossible to do that. And I think Nick Sirianni has we talked a lot about whether or not he's going to be around, especially before this season, after the collapse last season. And I think this definitively shows, he's got a lot of grace. He's got quite the rope to work with.
Yeah. The one thing I will say to the Eagles, thank you very much. I'm going to use this money. I'm taking the family out on Valentine's Day. We're going out. We're gonna go live it up. Take wife and kids out. We're gonna go and enjoy it.
You don't feel like that's
the
dirty
thing.
money a little bit? Like you don't feel a little guilt?
Listen,
cheddar, baby.
Listen, in life, you get very few things that you actually have control over, and you barely even have control over those things that you have. So at any point that I could play both sides of the fence, and if I win, great, cool. I had no control over that. Feels great. And then if I lose, cool. Then I'm going to go ahead and double up an investment, and we'll march forward.
I was on your team with this when we were winning Super Bowls. Now that we're losing Super Bowls, I feel way worse about this whole arrangement.
Listen, I needed to get some of this money back. My wife was slowly starting to stop letting me do this. She was rolling her eyes. I never told you guys the story, but even on Sundays, we went out partying the night before, and she had to drop me back off at my car. And she's like, "Where are you going to go now?" And I was like, "Well, I got to go to the casino." She's like, "Are you kidding me?" She's like, "I had to drop you off at your car because you were too drunk to drive." Responsible.
Hey, no, that's responsible.
Yeah.
No.
I was. Hey, shout out
to Al.
Yep, positive life decisions.
Yeah.
But then I was like, "Well, I'm going to run to the casino on my way home." And she's like, "Dear God."
Well, it worked out for you. Let's go over to the halftime show. Let's talk about Kendrick Lamar.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure Scotty has a rant teed up for this halftime show. Scotty, did you like the halftime show?
I think that this halftime show, if you listen to the Super Bowl preview episode, the halftime show turned out exactly as you would expect. Because I think it happened exactly like I thought it would. Kendrick Lamar, I like Kendrick Lamar a lot. I think what makes Kendrick Lamar so good is the fact that he's a lyricist, that he's an artist with lyrics, which is pretty rare in today's music environment. Like most songs are just absolute garbage. And at the very least, like it's almost like prime Lil Wayne. Like you listen to his music, and every time you listen to a song, you catch something creative that he did that's like not so obvious. Like he's very, very, very talented in that way. And I appreciate that about him. It's still true that this format is like the worst possible place for Kendrick Lamar to play. Like, I understand there are lots of people out there who love rap music. If you were to poll the NFL fan base, it's like the most generous estimate is 50% of fans like rap music. So you already know that, there are 60-year-olds and 50-year-olds who are watching this game, and they're confused. Like, they're not even like, this is garbage. They don't know what's going on. And I don't understand why the NFL is like, we're going to have a performance that half the people watching are just going to be like in a state of confusion the entire halftime show. I don't get that. I will, just one thing that I appreciated.
Pause.
Okay, go ahead.
Source, you're right. You can keep going. I'm going to say source, you're right, and you know who I was watching it with, and that's largely what I was being told. It was his family.
Yeah, no, I can just imagine in households all across America, all these people just like,
what is this?
What is happening right now? And
How many people fit in that car?
Yeah, I do appreciate the fact that I kind of expected with an artist like Kendrick Lamar that there were going to be about a dozen strippers on the stage at any given time, and he didn't do that, which I do appreciate. It's like he had some sense of like, oh, this isn't just an audience of 20-year-olds. There are also a bunch of 8-year-olds watching, so it's good that he kept them in mind. I know the whole thing with Kendrick is this beef with Drake. I get that. Everybody loved that. Okay, maybe I'm just an old man, but I don't give a shit if two random rappers don't like each other. It doesn't matter to me at all. And people are like, oh, this performance was so awesome. He really got Drake. Who cares? These are adults. Like, I don't give a shit if they're mad at each other. I don't care. Like, why does that matter at all? And I don't see how that would make the performance better. And at the end of the day, if you don't know his songs, you were there, you couldn't understand a word he was saying. Like, if you don't know the songs, they're all very fast, and I like that about him. I like that kind of music, but it was so fast that you can't understand what he's saying. He's not really dancing. He's just kind of hobbling around back and forth for a half hour. It was terrible. It was a terrible halftime show,
Yeah.
and that's what you'd expect from having a person like Kendrick Lamar do it.
Yeah, I think so. I'm definitely in the minority on this one. I liked the halftime show mainly because I really like Kendrick Lamar and I like his music. But I was telling Christy, my wife, and I was telling her, I was like, hey, brag. Number one, brag. I have a wife. And but I was telling her, it's like it's such a niche artist. Like, yes, he has like a cult following, and a lot of it has to do with just like how popular he's been, and obviously he wins Grammys and all that stuff. But like, if you go front to back on any one of his albums, you know, it's a niche thing. Like, you got to really be into it. You got to know what you're listening for. You got to be into the music and what he's saying. And like, you know, we love listening to it, but we were both like, I don't know how this is going to show up at like a halftime performance for everybody else.
It didn't.
And I mean, yeah. And I mean, I liked it. So I'm like, whatever. I was definitely in the target audience for whatever they were serving up here because we enjoyed it. But I get it because it's not something that everybody can sing along to. Like, if you put Neil Diamond out there, people are probably gonna be like, oh, yeah, sick. Like, you're probably going to get a high approval rating because people are going to know a lot of the songs. But if you put somebody in there that they don't, like if you put a country artist on there, for me, honestly, like a not a super popular one, you're gonna lose me too. I'm gonna be like, I don't
100%.
get this.
And that's why you shouldn't
perform.
have that's why you
Exactly,
shouldn't have Luke Combs or someone like that would be an exception. But like a huge number of country artists are the same thing. They have their cult following. There's like a relatively small number of people who absolutely love them. They're winning awards. They're famous, but it doesn't necessarily appeal to the broader audience. It's like this. It's like if you had. I don't know, name a random country artist out there, you know that 50% of the people watching are going to be like, this is garbage. And that's what the same thing you're doing with a rap artist like Kendrick Lamar. It just doesn't seem like a smart thing to do from the NFL's perspective.
Yeah, I thought there were a couple things when I was watching this. And we talked about it last week, like you said, Scotty, and a lot of it was kind of, we already knew what we were getting into. I would have loved to see a big name artist alongside him come out. You know, like Alan had mentioned Lil Wayne. I thought that would have been awesome. I would have loved to see somebody else come out there as well. The thing that you couldn't understand him. You really couldn't, because the lip sync was off at times and you could tell. And then the other half of the time, I'm like, I can't even hear what the song is because he's also performing live, and that just doesn't, like, it's really hard to capture that, while also being broadcast to the entire world. So it's kind of hard to understand him. I thought the cinematic side of things was actually pretty well done. There were a couple times where I was like, oh, that was kind of cool. Like the way they were moving the cameras and doing some of that, I did enjoy that. My favorite part was Samuel L. Jackson. That was the best part.
He didn't do anything.
It was awesome though. Just having Samuel L. Jackson there, he was high energy. It was Uncle Sam. It was just awesome. I loved that.
I see. The vibe I got from having Samuel L. Jackson is Kendrick Lamar is like, okay, I know there's a huge number of people in the stadium and watching on TV that don't give a shit about any of my music. How do I? It was like a Marvel movie come to a live performance. Like, how do I just get someone that everybody knows and just put them on screen for a few seconds? That way, people have a reason to like it.
The what I had taken away is like the meaning of it all was that Uncle Sam Jackson, Sammy J,
Uncle Sam Jackson. Love that.
He basically kept telling Kendrick Lamar to chill out because white people aren't going to understand, like they're going to. What was it here? Let me read the quote.
The ironic thing is, like, all of like the USA and all the things he had, and there's just some like interwoven stuff with Trump being there and some of the things he was saying, and
Sam Jackson was basically telling
directed.
Kendrick to calm down and not be ghetto because white people won't be able to handle it.
It was, and I'm white. Hey.
Yes, we all are.
Which, if you open Facebook today, is like 99% of the feedback from people.
But that's the thing
Facebook.
is, like, why are you specifically trying to be divisive? Like, the Super Bowl is one of the few things in culture that bring people together. And I know in today's media space, you might not feel that, especially if you're a Chiefs fan. Like, everybody hates you. But generally speaking, the Super Bowl is like one of the very few events. It's like Super Bowl and Christmas and Thanksgiving that you just know the entire country is rallying around, and it brings everybody together, and you use that opportunity to specifically be divisive. It does not make any sense to me. I don't understand. Like, this goes,
everybody's got a message to spread, Scotty,
all the political statements, like, if you like Patrick Mahomes, I think does a great job of this in the few moments when he's asked controversial stuff by the media. He's usually just like, the water off the duck's back. I'm here to play football. Like that's good. That's a good thing. You want to be likable to the most people because it's a good cultural phenomenon the NFL brings to all of us, and we should appreciate that. And there should be respect for that and reverence for it. And instead, we're just like, we're just gonna call all white people idiots for not liking me babble for 30 minutes.
Everybody has an agenda, Scotty.
It's crazy.
And Uncle Sam Jackson was the best part. He was the best part.
I like this Uncle Sam Jackson.
I thought the best part was Serena Williams. If you cared about the beef, the Serena Williams crypt.
Oh yeah, all of it. And SZA.
Yeah.
The other artist he brought up.
Yeah.
It's all interwoven. I will put it like he is definitely a grade A hater. Like he hates better than anybody. I don't think I've hated anybody as much as he hates Drake. And it's quite amazing. I think that's the tough thing for Drake in this, if you're a Drake fan, is that you had the Emmys where everybody was singing A minor, and then you're at the Super Bowl and you hear A minor, and you're like, Christ.
Yeah, he was wearing the Amazon chain. It was actually an A minor chain, but it looked like the Amazon.
I saw that too. It was like, you just buy that.
That wasn't
that
product
shit.
placement?
No, but I really do want one of those
Prime
chains.
Days?
Yeah,
Prime Days.
Prime.
Prime Day chain.
Amazon sales just went up. No free ads. While we're talking about ads, let's talk about our favorite commercial, gentlemen. Were there any that stood out? The one that stood out to me, I loved the Eugene Levy where his eyebrows started flying around because he's pretty well known for having some bushy eyebrows, and so I actually did get a chuckle from that one. The other one that comes to mind for me, I loved the Michelob Ultra one with William Dafoe, and I don't remember her name. The woman who was on Schitt's Creek, Catherine O'Hara. And they were playing pickleball, and they were like, we'll play you for an ultra. I like that one too. But what did you guys have any that stood out to you that you enjoyed?
This is harder than
one.
most years because I was in a deep state of depression. So
Oh,
I was
come
not.
on, man.
I was
We
not
gotta
in
get
the
you out
mood.
of that. We got to get you some good mind games.
He said
we got to get
48
you some
hours. He's back.
48
I know,
hours.
but we got to, even in the moment, you're just like, I have no control over this shit. I'm just watching grown men do whatever they do, and I got to react to it a certain way.
Yeah. No, I
You know?
appreciate. Again, makes sense.
I'll come rub
I
your
agree with what you're saying.
temples.
No, you
I,
need to rub something else.
I am not. Oh, okay.
That's what I call them.
I am not an emotional man. I don't know if you've gathered that about me.
What? You?
Football gets me as emotional as I get, which is still, I was sitting silently on the couch. It's not like I was freaking out, but it was annoying to say the least. And losing the game is not a big deal. It's just like it's the way it happened that was the saddest part. But with all that said, commercials. The one commercial that did make me laugh was the one where all the mustaches started, the Pringles one, where all the mustaches started flying around. I thought that one it wasn't like laugh out loud hilarious, but I thought it was pretty entertaining. Seeing James Harden with the Abe Lincoln beard going was pretty funny. So I appreciated that.
The weirdest one was probably the seal one.
Yeah, where he's a
Seal
real
was
seal.
on a seal. I was like, what are we doing?
See, that one was actually spoiled for me. It was going around social media before the Super Bowl, so I actually
was.
saw that
Oh,
whole
really?
commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I saw it,
that was the first time I saw it, and I was
Yeah.
like, this makes absolutely no sense to me. My favorite one, though, was the Doritos one with the UFO.
yeah.
Where they're fighting over that bag of Doritos. I don't know. I always think those are
Must have
hilarious.
missed that one.
It's like a guy sitting in his house, and the UFO comes to like beam up, but he's trying to just beam up the Doritos, so they're just fighting over the bag of Doritos as the UFO is trying to take
The
them.
concept was kind of stolen from the pizza rolls one. There's been a pizza rolls commercial
Yeah, where
going
the
around with
alien
that same
got
thing.
squished.
Yeah.
I thought overall though it was kind of dud. Like there wasn't anything. Doesn't it? Okay,
feel like
could
we've
be
been
us
saying that
getting
for
old.
years.
This could be us. Okay, this is what I was gonna say. This could be us getting old. But I just feel like used to be a lot more to it. Even that NFL Honors Show, which we didn't even get to talk about really.
God.
The show, the show itself.
Oh, Lord,
The
that was
production of that was
terrible.
awful. It was bad. Like Snoop Dogg was kind of funny, but you could tell like nobody was really laughing at his stuff because it was just kind of like
We got
it
a
was all
whole
very-
nother conversation to have about Snoop Dogg. Why the
was
fuck
all-
is Snoop Dogg everywhere?
It was all lowbrow, like weird humor, like low hanging fruit. You know, they mentioned the refs 30 times, and they talked.
He did bring up Bill Belichick's girlfriend, which
Yeah,
that was
funny.
hilarious.
That was the
That
one
was
funny
hilarious.
part of the entire thing.
Yeah.
And that was at the very beginning, so that's
Yeah.
how you know it was a long episode. But don't you feel like just the production value of things has gotten like less? Like there is not
And I
much
don't know if it's
emphasis
because
on making it.
we're
I don't
getting
know,
older.
but I feel
because
like,
I've thought
I
that
feel
too.
But I feel like we might be right. I think everybody's just so used to certain things, like, oh, this is going to be the best, so they're like, oh, this is the best. But then you get there and you're like, that's kind of underwhelming. You're like, yeah, because I don't think it actually is that great anymore. I think the production value, that score bug, which we never talked about on the Super Bowl, was shit. I'm pretty that looked like a. Now I love Tecmo Super Bowl, but that looked like you popped in a Nintendo game and that was the score bug they grabbed. And they're like, that works.
When I
It
saw
was
that, the first thing I
Unimaginative.
thought of,
It was
the first thing I thought of was that it looked exactly like a graphic we would have on our podcast. Like if we were showing a game, that's exactly what I would make on
Shout out
Canva
Leatherbrains.
for free. Yeah.
Hey, they need to hire us then. But I think we're right. Just like the overall production value of everything just seems like very low. Like I get everyth's expensive nowadays, and maybe that's how it's presenting itself. Is everything costs so much money now to produce? It's like you gotta cut some corners wherever you can because it's not great.
No,
Not great.
And I think it's I don't think it's because we're getting older, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, it might be.
It definitely
might
feels
be.
like a Matt thing to get mad at.
It does.
Yeah, I've been mad about it for years, so I'm glad you guys are catching up.
We're just catching on.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, that's going to wrap up this episode. That's going to wrap up the Super Bowl conversation. It's been fun. This is the sad reality that we are now hit with, that there is no
more
football for a few months. Obviously, there's going to be a lot to talk about this off season, but I think we've earned ourselves a break. So for all you Brainiacs that tune in every week, we're going to take a 2-week break. We're going to take some time off here at Leatherbrains to take a breather from the show. We're still going to be active on socials, but we have earned ourselves it's been quite a long season. We've earned ourselves a 2-week break, so we will pick things back up 2 weeks.
Let's pull up
from
our
now.
calendar.
So that would be March 4th. We're going to be back. But
Kick off March Gladness. We'll get
amen
everything
to
rolling again
that.
in March.
Yeah, dude. Let's get some
Ready
March
to roll,
Gladness
baby.
going. Some free jerseys out to our Brainiacs. So
Hey, I already had people reach out asking if we're going to do March Gladness again because they're like, I want to get a chance to win some free jerseys. So.
I don't know. Those people, do they listen to the show?
Yeah.
I don't want freeloaders in our brain.
Well, they do. They do listen.
Yeah, who are we kidding? That's the whole
they're
reason we do March Gladness, actually, is to get people
A+
excited.
listeners.
Yeah.
They're A+ listeners.
the true Brainiacs. So, gentlemen, it's been a good year. I'm sorry that
Yes, sir.
the result was not exactly what we wanted, but you made it to the dance, and there's probably a very good chance you're going to do it again next year. So
Maybe. Who knows?
The Chiefs didn't win, so I don't know if I'm still undecided if I want to be a Chiefs hater. If the Chiefs won this game, hands down definitively would be a Chiefs hater moving forward. But I'm stewing on it.
First of all,
Who's okay?
we want you to be a Chiefs hater.
I
So
know you
please, Please go
Oh,
ahead
and
and
that's-
that.
Yeah,
You don't
I think
want that?
No, I don't. I like it
It's crazy.
when Slaps is on our side.
Not wanting Slaps to be a hater and also betting against the team in the Super Bowl. Like, that's just 2 strikes. But
come to the dark side, brother.
you know what the
How do I get the
saddest
third
part
one,
about
and what
this whole thing
happens?
is? I don't know. I haven't decided yet.
All right.
The saddest part about this whole ordeal is the fact that my undefeated playoff hoodie has been defeated.
Are you gonna burn it?
Yeah.
I don't
What do you
know
do?
what I'm going to do with it.
Because it's
I don't
too
know. I
small
feel like I
for
can't
you.
wear it anymore. Like, if it was a close game, like, maybe it was like, it got
Okay.
almost there. No, it wasn't.
That's why I don't wear, sharing to the masses, I don't wear team gear on game days, whether it's college, pro, whatever. I don't wear it because because I feel like it gets bad juju on it if you lose with it. And I
It
feel
was
like
good
I
juju
can't
for
wear
so
it
long.
anymore.
Yeah.
Like
Maybe we
I
just frame
wore
it.
a couple jerseys and I only wore them to the Super Bowl parades. That's got a lot of good juju on it.
It's kind of like a microcosm of Travis Kelce's career, because it's like it had a really, really, really good run, but now that it ended like this, I don't think I want it anymore. Like, I just kind
I
of
think. Spoiler alert: we're gonna get a studio. I think we frame it and put it up. In
Yeah,
the
baby.
studio.
I think we do. Oh yeah, we have to. We have to put in our make it like an effigy.
Yeah.
then I have to look at it every week.
Yeah, it's okay. But it makes you stronger.
Yeah.
All right. I'll think about it.
You sound
If
really
it's burned
Maybe
by
we
then,
give
it's
it away
not
in
my
March Gladness to somebody.
Scotty's.
fault. You used too small.
Scotty's tear-soaked hoodie.
Almost a 3-peat hoodie.
You should write that on it. Almost.
Almost
Yeah,
a
I'll
three.
sign it. Anyone interested in having my hand-me-downs, I will autograph it for you. It's very valuable.
Classic.
All right, gentlemen, it's been good
boys.
fun. We will pick this thing up in 2 weeks. Let's get the hell out of here. We
are out.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you tune into our new releases every week on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and check out leatherbrains.com for all of your fantasy football needs. And remember, Brainiacs, a championship should be more than a fantasy.